Hello, Comic-Con. Good morning. First day, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all and talk about women in entertainment. I'd love to start off by asking the panel if any of you can recall a specific defining moment in your career that made you realize, this is where I belong and this is what I'm meant to be doing.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
No pressure.
No pressure, no pressure at all. Can you hear me?
Hi. I will say my very first job was cutting a roll-in package for the Oscars, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And I realized at that time that I was just hooked on editing. That was just it. I just knew it was going to be something I was going to do.
I worked as an interior designer before I made the transition, and it was a career that I thought I was going to be on for a long time, but when I started helping my friends with small projects, production design was just so much more inventive than working in the real world. And I worked on a small music video for a guy named Michael Leviton, and he did sea shanties, and so we did a forced perspective miniature mermaid lair for his music video, and I was just totally hooked.
Yeah.
It was just so exciting to live outside the real world. So,
That's very exciting. I know that my first real moment of, oh my goodness, I have to be doing this. This is where I'm supposed to be. I ended up helping a friend with an indie feature. This would have been about 13, 14 years ago, and she needed help with the indie feature, so I just jumped right in as a head of department on a major feature without really kind of knowing what I was doing. And I managed to get through it. It was a fast learning curve, and then I figured it out, and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to be doing this. I love the vitality. I love being surrounded by creative people. You never know what every day is going to bring. It's something different. You get pushed to the limit. It's just, I love working in film. And the people you get to meet are absolutely amazing, and the travel, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the more defining moments, I did a few days on Damien Chazelle's Babylon, and watching Margot Robbie, what a powerhouse, do the same dance scene. It was that opening dance scene in the movie, if you guys have seen it. She did that for 16 hours straight, and watching, it was insane. Like, no hitches, just perfection, and super professional and happy to do it. And I think standing behind the monitor and watching that level of artistry happening, it was really a moment for me where I was staring at the monitor like, wow, this is really where I want to be. It was emotional, it was incredible, and working with that level of artistry was just perfection.
Amazing, thank you. Let's dive into how all of your crafts and skills come together to enhance a character's story or the setting of a show. Alisha, I'd love for you to share your process behind creating the makeup designs for characters and any unique challenges you face in translating those designs onto screen projects like Abbott Elementary.
Sure, so I think a lot of my design process personally is based in realism. I'm a really observant person, so when I meet people through the world, like everywhere I go, if it's like a party or just a friend's house or wherever I am, I kind of take a lot of notes about who people are and like kind of their stories and then how they present themselves in the world, and I think that really kind of translates into the makeups that I do. I try not to like alter the way people's faces look unless it calls for it in the character specifically. But specifically for, I would say, Abbott Elementary, I really wanted to take a character design that had already existed and take them through sort of a journey through their maturity through the season, specifically Janine and Ava, if you guys are fans of the show. They have a lot of moments this season where they're kind of maturing and elevating through personal relationships and even like Ava's relationship with how she looks at her job in the show. So I think taking what had already existed and finding story points where I could sort of sneak in what I wanted to do to elevate those characters to make them look more grown up, more mature, more sure of themselves. But finding those moments were challenging and tricky because you also have to serve the story that has already existed and not pull you guys out of the storyline thinking, oh God, like why all of a sudden is she wearing tons of lipstick or what, like this doesn't fit the characters. So I think sneaking it in, and what I did with this second season is I kind of hid that elevation in some of the guest stars. So I got the audience sort of used to seeing more makeup in those guest stars because you've never seen them before. And then once we kind of hit those pitches with those actresses and even actors, I could kind of keep taking Janine and Ava up like a journey with you guys. But yeah, so that's kind of it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely with Taraji P. Henson this past season, you know,
Yeah.
her look actually kind of mirrored sort of what Ava was like in the first season, you know, and to
Yep.
see that gradual change was really, really amazing. Jaala, how did you approach hair design for shows like Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies to ensure characters had a unique identity that reflected their personality and journeys?
Oh, that's such a good question. How I approach hair design for big shows such as this is I do a lot of research first. Obviously, I read the script. The second thing that I do is I do a really huge deep dive into the historical period. So I'm looking at print advertising, I'm looking at media, I start pulling photos. I actually put a lookbook together for a show like for Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies. I put together a whole book together that cataloged men's looks, women's looks, children's looks, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different like ethnic groups. I wanted to make sure that whatever looks that we were pulling for these characters were actually going to be something that you could find in that time era. But just because you find something in a magazine doesn't mean it looks good on every single person, right? So when we were developing the characters, it was very much a collaborative process working with our costume designers, also working with our showrunner who had a very clear idea of how these people were going to look. And for each one of the characters, now we only had about 3 weeks of prep to from when we actually had people in our chair to when we started filming. Wow. And we had to try about 20 to 30 different looks on each character as we were trying to figure out what was going to be suitable, what fit with how their characters presented themselves. And eventually when we boiled everything down, we got the approvals, everybody was coming in, and once we got these looks down to the characters, once we sort of figured out, okay, this is who they are and this is how it's going to be, as the season progressed, then we are able to start taking those certain elements and turning them and sort of polishing them and sort of bringing them to a different place by the end of the season.
Wow. And this wouldn't be Comic-Con without us diving into genres like sci-fi. You know, we love sci-fi over at IO9. Rafaella, how do you create costumes that convey sci-fi elements while still grounding the characters in believable and relatable ways, like on projects like The Imperfects?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think that for myself, the best way of doing it is by offering layers and really honing into what type of story do we actually want to tell, because even though it's a sci-fi story, we still want to convey real people, individuals that our people that are watching these TV shows can really look at them and find themselves in. So at least for myself, which hopefully seemed to have worked throughout the years. It's about figuring out different ways to layer and tell stories throughout literally, the smallest details, right? I'm a really big fan of nest eggs, so that's a really big way where I kind of bring in the reality into things like sci-fi or even in period costuming, right? There's different ways to do that, so yeah.
Sara, your work often focuses on spotlighting communities and expanding our perspectives on people. Could you share any specific examples from your experiences on projects like Swarm, where your production design choices played a significant role in achieving this goal?
Yeah, that's something that's really important to me, and it's one of the reasons why I switched careers. When I was working as an interior designer, I was working for big corporations, or I was working for individuals who have the resources to hire someone to design their home. And that's a very specific set of people. And I felt very limited by that. And it was really exciting, especially in my early career, to get opportunities to work in spaces that are reflective of a variety of different people from different socioeconomic backgrounds who have different kinds of relating to their space, and still give them the opportunity to show that they care about how they live, which I think is something that's not always granted in the larger media context to people. Swarm was really interesting because not only was I able to show a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds, but we were also viewing a lot of these places through the lens of Dre. Mm-hmm. So that meant that she is somebody who's not really connected to the world in a typical way. She's very stunted. She's very limited in her understanding of these people. So all of the spaces that she's going into, she doesn't feel very comfortable in them. In her own space, it's very childlike, and that's a place where she feels super comfortable. But in all of these other environments, I was playing with symmetry to either make those spaces off symmetry or super symmetry in order to give us an understanding of the power dynamic there that she might be feeling. And I was able to work with different levels, like her foster parents. They're of the same socioeconomic level as Rashida's parents, but they have very different interior environments. They have very different homes. Her foster parents have a very controlled environment that is really about portraying to the people that are in her neighborhood, in their community, that they have wealth. But that's not important to Rashida's parents. What's important to them is the way that they relate to the people they love. And being able to show that and show Dre's comfort in each of those spaces was super important to me.
Yes, I loved that. Like, aesthetic, and you're right, Dre's perspective definitely was like so singular. It gave me like American Psycho vibes a little, yes.
Thank you.
Circling back to comedy shows, Maura, let's talk about editing episodes on projects like Kevin Can F Himself and Murderville. How did you navigate the balance between the comedic moments and the more dramatic elements to create a more cohesive and engaging narrative?
You picked two very different shows that I booked at. One's really broad comedy, and the other one is single camera drama mixed with a multicam comedy. And I always say, if I'm not laughing or crying at my job, I'm definitely not doing it right. So one of the things that comedy has a very quick pace. You want to make sure that it's got this, what we call like rat-a-tat, no air, everybody's talking. And drama is definitely the rhythm where you want to hold and make sure that people can feel the emotion just in a stare. So a show like Kevin Can F Himself, combining those two qualities, we really wanted to make sure that people felt when they were in the world of the multicam, that it was bright and funny and its own like honest stage. So when we transitioned to the single camera drama element, we made sure that not only we had great actresses like Annie Murphy, but Valerie Armstrong, who's the showrunner, we worked transitions to make sure that the sound changed, that the music changed, that the performance changed. So we had that feeling of being thrust from one world to the other. So that way you could balance both the elements of rhythm along with sound and all the wonderful things that everybody on this panel does. Production design is a huge part of making sure that those transitions work, that you get that I can mold it together as an element to make you guys feel what the characters are feeling. So I always say the footage tells me what to do. I don't tell the footage what to do. So it's more about creating a rhythm that's already there, inherent in the actors, and creating sounds around it.
Yes, absolutely. And, filmmaking is such a collaborative process, so we, definitely wouldn't be here without the writers and actors and everyone you see here. We have such a talented group, and I'd love to hear about ways you are pushing for diversity and inclusion. Jaala, let's start with you, since you've been a member of IATSE's Women's Committee for the past 7 years. What specific initiatives have you worked on to promote diversity in the entertainment industry?
That's a good one. Well, here's an interesting fact about diversity in the workplace. It's actually been proved that when you have gender diversity, like a greater representation of gender diversity within the workplace, there is a propensity for people to overperform. So when you have a greater representation of women versus men in like a binary sort of system, then what you'll actually find is that the performance goes up and through the roof. I've been a member of the IATSE Women's Committee for about the last 7 years, and we've done a whole bunch of great initiatives, to encourage women, more women to be coming, forward into film and to be filling into departments that traditionally are more male-based. We've done a couple of great studies, like pay equity studies. We've sat down and determined, what areas is there a lack of diversity, and how do we combat that? How do we sort of change that diverse or try to increase the diversity in that area. The Women's Committee also has supported different initiatives like funding for independent filmmakers, programs that we have locally. I was actually able to go and take one of those in the wintertime. I was able to produce my first short film, actually just this past little while. Thank you, Lisa. She runs, so that, the Women's Committee has, providing opportunities for women to try new departments and try new areas, and we're definitely pushing for that, and we're trying to do the best that we can.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. We love to hear it. Alisha, in your experiences, how does leadership manifest differently when women take charge in the filmmaking process? What have you noticed on set?
I think for me, like I guess when I first started 20 years ago, there was a big kind of difference in the way sets would sort of look that were a little more male dominated. I think right now, at least in my market, which is Los Angeles, things have kind of evened out a little bit. So I think for me, the way I kind of approach things is making sure that I build out a team that is specific for that job. And that doesn't always mean that those same great people that I love to work with can necessarily work on every single type of job with me. And I do special effects and beauty makeup. So a lot of times I end up with projects in my lap that are very centric to both of those things. So I typically build out teams that can get along with talent, and I build them from sort of myself down personality-wise. Personality matches are super important to me, whether that's a guy, a girl, whoever, to sort of fill out the department, and it's really about your skill set and what you bring to the table. And most people that I bring on or that I like to work with are multi-talented, so they can fabricate, they can do special effects. I can send them to set and they're happy to do it. They can do a great glam makeup or a super pared down, like dirt kind of basic makeup. But I think it's really about identifying all the people in your toolbox and placing those people in the job that is kind of relevant at that moment, and keeping it kind of as diverse as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to actually add something on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, speaking about how the workplace has changed with more women coming to the forefront, I think in general, we're seeing not only more women, but a lot more BIPOC people as well, people from marginalized communities. And anytime that someone who has been the only person in a room becomes a leader, they have a lot of understanding of what it might be like to be the only person in the room.
Yeah.
So as a crew member, if you're in an environment where you might be the minority, but you have a person you can go to and connect with if you're having certain kinds of problems working on a project, because everything's super complex when you're working on these shows, it really makes for a more welcoming environment
I
for
agree.
everyone.
Yes.
I just to add on that, I'm often the only woman in my department, and the more women that I bring in too, you really feel a sense of responsibility to help them and guide them through that process to widen it for other women to come to the table.
Awesome. Yes, mentorship and support, in these networks are so vital for career growth. How have you found important mentors in your careers or have been involved in mentorship networks while just entering the field? And does anyone have any specific thoughts on that?
I have a mentor. I make sure, I have an assistant editor who I'm there for to make sure that she can rise up and go into the chair. That is my main goal with my assistant editor. I also am part of the ACE internship program to help people mentor into the post-production part of the business. It allows them to look at every aspect of the business, get them the skill set that they could actually go in and get an assistant editor job and hopefully filter them into the community with a sense of confidence and having somebody to go to if they have a question like, is this the right rate? Is this something that I shouldn't be doing? Are they asking too much of me? So I'm a huge proponent of that.
Incredible.
I think it's also important to find mentors that maybe not,
Yeah.
they're not doing the exact same thing that you are, but they can expose you to a wider range of tasks and different parts of the system so that you can understand your job in a more holistic way. So if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out who to go to, it's certainly important to find someone in your desired field, but also anyone who's been doing something.
I always
is
feel
gonna
like
have
it's
knowledge.
personality too. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be like, if you connect with somebody, go talk to them about it. They might know, like if I know somebody who's into makeup, maybe, hey, I know somebody who can maybe talk to you,
Yeah, people can connect people really
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, mentorship is super key. I mean, if you think about all the milestones that you reach in your life, you've generally had somebody to encourage you, to give you guidance, to sort of drive you forward. There's always going to be somebody there who is giving you that inspiration to keep going forward. I mean, if I think about all the people that have mentored me, I mean, we'd be sitting here for 5 minutes while I rattled off a bunch of names. And, in turn, what I do is I try to take that example that they've set for me, and I try to take it with people that I work on my team, or especially the new workers that are coming into the industry. I'm like, okay, how can I help you? What do you need to learn? How can I guide you in this situation? Let me show you this creative process. Oh my goodness, you have a different one. Teach me your way. I think it's all about bringing forward people, whether it be an older generation or a younger generation, and that's what mentorship is all about. It's about teaching, sharing those skills, and making sure that we also have a next generation of inspired filmmakers that are character-driven and excited about world building. So I think, you have to have your mentors, but you also have to be one and take that responsibility on as a leader in your field, for sure.
Yes. We need more of that for sure,
Yeah.
always.
We do. Yeah.
As women in the entertainment industry, what are some of the key milestones or achievements in your careers that you're most proud of, and why? Rafaella, what comes to your mind?
I know this sounds basic to say, but genuinely every show I've done in my very young career has been a highlight. Certainly there has been specific shows that have offered me different accolades, and receiving an Emmy nomination was a huge privilege.
Yeah.
Thank you. But genuinely one of the biggest highlights, and in a very particular frame of time between To All the Boys I've Loved Before coming out and receiving an Emmy nomination, there was about 3 months, and in that time frame, I had a lot of fans reach out to me and talk to me about me hitting the mark with Laura Jean and with
Yes.
the sisters, and that meant so much to me that I've managed to show up for them in the same way that they essentially showed up for me and made such a huge difference in my career. So that certainly has been a huge highlight. And as a woman as well, professionally, costumes is certainly one, if not the most female-led department. And we work in an industry which is very patriarchy-led. So I encourage my peers to have a voice. I encourage my non-binary, my queers, to show up and represent themselves and feel free to just be exactly who they are. And speaking previously about mentorship as well, that I try to meet them in eye level because I know exactly who I was 10 years ago, and I want them to know that there's how and where to go to. So yeah, so many highlights are related to everybody else who's been involved.
Laura Jean is a style icon, so yes. And based on your experiences and lessons you've learned as a woman in the entertainment industry, what valuable advice can you offer to those in the audience who are passionate about pursuing their dreams and making a positive impact in this field? Maura, start us off.
I mean, if I could say anything to anybody, it'd be your own advocate. Speak up. I mean, as someone who's been the only woman in the room, nobody's going to listen to anybody but me. So my philosophy is get fired for the right reasons.
Yes.
Yes. You're gonna get fired. You're not in the business if you don't get fired, but if you're gonna do it, do it on your terms. Because you know what? We have something to say.
I have to say that being persistent is key. It's really easy to be like, oh, I didn't get an email back because I sent 20. Well, send 5 more, and you will get an answer on that. Like number 25, you're going to get an answer. You're going to go to set. You're going to screw up, but you're going to learn so much.
I don't screw up.
Of course not you, but
They're wrong.
I like your perfectionism.
I screw up.
I mean, I will say I've been fired twice, and again, my very young career, and those twice that I've been fired are the reason why I have an agent, are the reason why I ended up getting the show that essentially changed my career. So, I mean, everything happens for a reason, and still with all that happening, just be persistent and also be kind. Treat people the way that you would like to be treated, because we work 80 hours a week, and it's so it's your chosen family.
That's a great point.
And I think we should also be kind to ourselves. I think that's something that it was really hard for me to learn, and it's still hard for me to see myself make mistakes and not berate myself for that. But in every process, you're learning, and you don't stop learning, hopefully, until the very end. So it's a very long process of learning how to work with different people. We're constantly working with different kinds of people. So what might have worked in one interaction is not going to work in another interaction, and you don't know that coming in. So even if you come up against somebody who's going to not be very giving or be trying to be a roadblock to you, don't let them stand in your way. Your goal is for you, and you can do it. Learn from that and just move on. Don't let them stand in your way.
Right. And I think, your work is always going to speak for itself. So when you do come up against people like that, you got to realize, I'm like, okay, that person's over there, they're doing their thing, but my work is going to be over here, and you have to separate the two. I think the other thing you got to bring when you're pursuing a career in film is being consistent with your word, being consistent with your actions, and being consistent with your work. I think that's really, really important so that people always know there's always a specific standard of quality, and to always be able to change on the fly, if somebody needs something and they need to change it, then just change it. Work with it. You've got to flow. There's a lot of changes that happen in film. It's like every day something new is coming down the pipe, and it's not about you. And that's another thing you got to realize when you're working in film. Like you have to take a step back. Not everything is about you. This is about creating a work of art. And when we're all collaboratively coming together, this art comes to the forefront. And just don't take it personally. If things need to change, just change them. Just go with it.
Yeah, and I think
Everyone, yes.
I think also hiring people that are better than you. I always make sure the people that I surround myself with, I can learn from. Even being a makeup department head, it's really important that I'm still learning and I'm growing. And like maybe somebody does something a little bit different than I do, and it's faster. Our business is all about speed. So I think learning from other people to get faster. I think, and as a woman, my biggest bit of advice is to learn the word no.
Yeah.
I got real close to that one. But learning to say no, things that don't sound like they would work for you, learning to say no to something that is completely unreasonable and standing firm in that. I think it's really hard for ladies to say no sometimes,
Definitely.
but it's my favorite word.
Yes.
It's my favorite word now.
The power of
So
no.
just learning no.
Yes, amazing. We're here at Comic-Con, and fandom is celebrated in many, many ways. We see costumes and cosplay and makeup and artists just exchanging their passion and ideas. I just want to know personally, what were some of your first fandom loves, and how did they inform your career paths?
Wow.
So much. I'm such a nerd.
Wow. Television to me is just magic. Honestly, I would watch anything that's a show that's something in a detective. He's a writer and a detective. I just love that. The devil and a detective, right? So to me, that's the balance of humor and drama that is about what stories are the most important thing in the world. We tell stories to inform each other on who we are, what we love, what is hard for us, where we connect. So for me, television, because it's episodic for me specifically, and in features too, you get to connect with these characters and like I said, anything in a detective. But it's just so amazing. That's to me, it's just the stories themselves,
Yes.
For me, anything sci-fi growing up, watching anything that just had textures and layers and colors, or just seeing the different combinations that people would put together really made a huge difference. But at the same time, seeing how a cardigan can have a meaning because it's tattered, or sometimes you have a character wearing the exact same outfit the entire time, and that choice of color, working with the production designer and the lighting and the makeup and the hair all together, when it's accurate, it's accurate. When it's clear, and you can see that in, Fifth Element. I mean,
Yes.
for an example. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big nerd. I'm also a big gamer. So I really love to see how costumes gets utilized in gaming as of the last few years. Yeah.
Cool.
I definitely loved Star Trek when I was a kid. I would not consider myself a Trekkie because there are people that bow down to. But I otherwise don't have a strong relationship to fandoms, which was part of the reason why I liked working on Swarm, because it's a very extreme version, if you will, of that fandom. But it's an amazing thing to see people find so much value and connection, and it brings so many people together to have these communities, and I love seeing that, being near that.
Yes.
Nice. I love this. I just think it's so cool. It's so neat to see people express themselves creatively and to see what they're connecting with story-wise, whether it be animations or feature films or whether it be like what comic books. I mean, personally, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to go run and find the Conan booth. That's my thing, right? You know, like it's just so cool to see how when people express themselves and what they connect with. I mean, we have a pink lady in the audience today that just
Yes.
brought me to tears. I was like, oh my God. Get a fan. It's really cool. So thank you, everybody, for being here today, for sure. This is great.
I think for me it was horror, the horror genre. Yeah, can I get some blood, some gore?
Season coming up.
But yeah, I mean, the first movie I saw that was a horror movie when I was a child was Chucky. I was like 4 years old, and my dad's like, "You're gonna sit here and watch this whole thing if I let you." So I did. But yeah, I think like that genre is like it rides such a fine line between comedy and it can be terrifying. So I think it kind of those are sort of one and the same. So I think that's really what made me love movies was that genre, and then it also kind of informed like where I wanted to go with doing special effects and beauty. You can kind of create an entire world, terrifying or funny. Yeah.
Awesome. And y'all have been a part of so many projects, and places like Comic-Con, you know, have activations or just like big posters. I know last year there was an Abbott Elementary, like you can walk through and be a part of different activities. Did y'all ever, you know, experience or see something that you were a part of that you got to like go in and check out in person and like really geek out over?
Oh, I have one from this season of Abbott Elementary. They had built this gorgeous, I don't want to like spoiler alert this for anybody who hasn't seen it, but in the second season there's a scene in a classroom that is a huge flower room. The entire thing was covered, and we actually built that on a stage. The detail, I'm so sad that we didn't get more wide shots because it's shot mockumentary style, but the details were insane. Like they had backpacks on the backs of chairs that were terrariums. Wow. They were gorgeous and so many flowers. Like our entire crew got to take the flowers afterwards, which was really fun. Our cars were just like full of these flowers from this room. But production design, I cannot say enough about production design when they're really thoughtful. But I think getting to see that in person, you all should be jealous.
I had Funko dolls made and sent to me, and I didn't know that they were made for To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Wow. And when they were sent to me, I cried so much because it was out of a print that was custom made and designed for the show. So that was a really lovely like fan moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I mean, nobody knows what editors do, so I never get this. I'll say that one thing I love is being able to see all the footage and outtakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I also do some sci-fi work, which I love, but a lot of the actors are acting against nothing. They're on green screen, right? So I guess I can tell this. So I was doing this scene, and these two actors were supposed to react to this lion coming out from behind him going, rah, you know, and they were supposed to be freaking out. And I'm watching the dailies, and the actors were all in. They were like really involved, and they're like into the thing. And the guy off screen just goes, rawr. I laughed. And I was working at home. I'm like, husband, come in here. You have to see it. And it was just the funniest thing I've ever seen. And I think that to me is one of those special things as an editor that I get to experience because I'm seeing it from a distance where you guys are living it in the now. And that's why I marvel at costumes, makeup, all of what you guys do. I marvel at, because I get to then take that and make it into the story. It's amazing. You guys. Love it.
I think it's important to say that it goes both ways, because seeing the final product, we don't really know how it's gonna, we know how it's gonna look like, but when it truly comes to fruition and you get to see it on a screen,
It's weird, right?
Yeah.
so weird, and it's not what you think it's gonna look like.
No, sometimes, yeah.
It's amazing. Like with Swarm, the editing was very important to the way that we understood how Dre moved through the world and her sort of cadence in
Yeah.
the world. But also sound design, and
Oh, yeah,
we
sound design's
made a
amazing.
pop star, and we did not have that pop star's music during the entirety of filming.
Yeah.
That was all done afterwards. So we didn't really totally know. We had an idea
But the
because we
thing
had
that's
some.
crazy is I'll get footage that you guys do, and I'll see in all the elements from makeup to hair to all of that what you're trying to inform me as a viewer. Like I'm your first viewer, so like I see all of that stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what the like Abbott Elementary, your makeup is phenomenal, and
Thank
you
you.
have like so much like you have such a diverse crew that you just do an amazing job. I just marvel over it. I think it's all I obviously think it's all magic.
This is super interesting, and I'm curious how other panelists feel about this, but when I watch dailies, I'm very grateful and I'm very happy to see it happening for reals, but I just want to do better every time I look at the dailies, right?
Yeah, you get very self-critical when you're watching your own work. Like on the dailies, I'm always like, I'm not specifically focusing on like what's really good. I'm like, okay, this needs to be fixed. I need to be like, balance here. This character needs more. This is not quite translating properly. I'm always constantly, how do I do better? How do I do better? How do I do better? And then when the final product comes out, I'm like, oh, okay.
It can sometimes take a long time to get to that place where you can really objectively see what
True.
you were able to do.
Right.
Because we're all people who want to do the best we can, so we just see the ways that we can improve, which gives us a lot of.
But don't you think it kind of
It
falls
has a lot
into that 1,000 hours that we all put in
Oh, yeah.
to make it,
That's
you know,
exactly
like
it.
it's, what would they say? You need 1,000 hours to become an expert at something. And so when you look at people who, yeah, that's okay.
10,000.
10,000 hours. Well,
1,000.
in my case, it's 1,000. Just kidding. But
It's like 2 weeks in film world, 1,000 hours.
yeah, the 10,000 hours of what you do to become an expert, and I think that shows in everybody up here.
Absolutely.
We spent 300 hours and over $2,000 in labor to create a gorgeous jacket for a final look for Tilda on the Imperfects, and you genuinely only see it for 15 seconds. And it was such a huge argument, huge negotiation for budget purposes, because it was truly like so relevant, and it's beautiful and it's the right thing, but it's on camera for 15 seconds, right?
But those 15 seconds matter.
Oh,
You know, they
100%.
inform. They inform so
Just
many
like,
people.
just like, our lovely hair and makeup designers can vouch for the amount of how early they have to show up on
Oh
set
my
and work
God.
with the actors.
Yeah. We're there pretty early, especially with a huge cast. Like on Grease, for example, some of our calls would start at probably like 3:30, sometimes 4 in the morning, because we had so many casts coming through. We'd have like 70 or 80 major cast coming through in the morning, and then we'd have 200, 300 background coming in all period costumes. So, a good portion of my day for about 6 hours was just chaos and running and curlers and curling irons and, a giant team of people being like, I hope we get there on time,
And also making really quick decisions to change
Very.
people in chairs and kind of like doing what we do, like doing main cast, and then also keeping an ear open for like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be a problem, and paying close attention. Like you're literally using both ears in two different directions when you're kind of working in a trailer like that to kind of get everybody done. Because
You have to. You have to be, like film is money. And so we have to be getting people in a very specific small time frame, getting them ready, and then getting them out the door and transporting them. There's a lot of stress. A hair and makeup trailer the first thing in the morning is,
Yeah.
it's just something. How
it's
do you
like-
describe it?
it's like a
It's a hive.
yeah.
It's a hive. A hive of creativity and people running around just like, oh.
Yeah, and it's like a 2-hour window usually to get everybody through, which sounds like a lot, but it's not when you consider the length of time in a service. So
Yeah.
it's just balance and chaos in a hive. That's
Yeah.
the best
Yeah,
word.
and I think that's probably why, like, you become so critical of your work at the end of the day because you feel like you haven't had enough time to do things maybe like perfectly or the way that you would like to achieve them. So you're always kind of running and chasing things and trying to fix it. I don't know, you're like always like, oh, wish I had 10 more minutes, but there's never 10 more minutes, right?
Yeah.
Or something goes like horribly wrong,
yeah.
you've got to pivot really quick and make a really fast decision. That happens a lot in special effects, everyone. Especially with blood, anytime you're dealing with blood. But
Have you had any prosthetics
100%.
fly off? Like you're doing a major scene and then somebody's thing flies off?
I haven't, but I've had blood gags go horribly wrong.
And that's why you fix
Horribly
it in post.
I don't know, this one, there was one that I don't think anybody could fix.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
I think also all of our departments do a lot of essentially like off genuine shooting work, right? Because you're there so early, you're the first one in, you're also the last one out because of the actors, right? And obviously, I mean, while something's being shot, then another set is being built. And like for us, like, I mean, we're at three places at once between set and shopping and being in the office doing fittings, and obviously all the like extra work that gets done afterwards. So it's not just what people think that it is, that we like show up on set on call time and then like we walk away. There's like so much more.
Definitely. That's why it's so important to have the artistry on hand, like in person on these sets, because y'all, are who curate these worlds and immerse us completely in them. It just, like, I'm so inspired by every one of you. To close off our panel, I'd like to go down the line and ask where the audience can look at your work next.
So the next thing I have airing will be Rap Shit Season 2 on HBO Max. Or are we just calling it Max now?
Max.
And then I just finished up, I think it's kind of running the festival circuit now, a feature called Central Valley, which was shot really close to where I grew up.
Nice.
Excellent. Well, I would say go watch Grease rather than Pink Ladies, but you can't find it right now because it got pulled.
What?
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, we were.
Internet, let them know to rehome it, please.
Boo. Yeah, so that was going to be a thing, and then of course, like I said, I just produced my first short film, and then we're still waiting for the writers' strike and supporting the writers, and of course all of our lovely SAG-AFTRA actors, and until that gets going, then pretty much holding back on anything, really.
Absolutely. Union strong.
The last project that I worked on was a project expanding the world of Reality Winner. So it's an independent feature film called Winner, and that is hoping to go through the festival circuit whenever those festivals start back up, and hopefully in a theater near you at some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My recent show that recently came out was, the last season for Kung Fu, I believe, is out. But the other thing I've been working on, which I cannot talk about, is also on halt because of the strike. So yeah.
I'm currently working on a show for Apple Plus called Acapulco, which is a charming show
good.
everyone should see. And the new season 3 is what we're doing now. And the last thing I did work on, if everybody looks down at your badge, it's called Gen V. Anybody gets a chance, it drops in September, I guess. So I can't say anything, that's all I can say.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our panelists, Alisha, Jaala, Sara, Rafaella, and Maura, for being here with us today and discussing the creative work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 PR and Comic-Con for putting this panel together, and thank you all for joining us.